Picture this. It's the 1990s. You turn on the TV, maybe the sound's just buzzing in the background, but you know what's on. Packed stadiums, the noise is incredible. You see the absolute giants of the game. Ronaldo wearing the black and blue of Inter, Zidane making magic happen for Juve, Batistuta about to unleash another rocket for Fiorentina. Remember that feeling. Or maybe you've just seen the clips online. A time when saying watching football didn't necessarily mean watching the Premier League or La Liga, it just meant watching Italian football. Serie A felt like the only place to be, home to virtually every world-class player on the planet. Welcome to Goalkickcast. Every kick, every cheer, every passion. So this deep dive is based on some really compelling material, specifically a fascinating YouTube transcript we've been exploring. It dives deep into that incredible, dominant era of Italian football, that absolute peak, and asks a fundamental, slightly painful question. What happened? How did that seemingly invincible system eventually unravel?
Right. So our mission here is to unpack that story for you. We're going to pull out the key insights from this source material. We'll look at the elements it identifies that made Serie A the undisputed king of world football, and then critically examine the reasons both internal missteps within Italy and seismic shifts happening globally that this analysis points to as leading to its significant and perhaps irreversible decline.
Yeah, it's a classic rise and fall story, really.
Yeah.
And as the analysis suggests, the lessons probably go well beyond just football.
Absolutely. So let's get right into that peak. The analysis we looked at describes the 90s and early 2000s as Serie A's golden age. It actually calls Italy the Hollywood of football back then.
And honestly, you can see why it felt that way. It really did.
It definitely did. The point is made that if you were considered a truly world-class player back then and you weren't playing in Italy, well, there was a sense you hadn't quite reached the absolute top of the sport.
Just think about some of those names again. Ronaldo, Zidane, Batistuta. But also the Italian legends who stayed and absolutely thrived there. Nesta, Maldini, Totti, Del Piero. They were all there, all peaking, basically in the same league at the same time.
And what's particularly striking, as the analysis notes, is that this quality wasn't just concentrated in maybe 2 or 3 mega clubs.
No, not at all.
Quality players were genuinely everywhere. You could see, proper national team regulars playing for clubs you might think of as mid-table today, like Parma or Udinese, even Perugia.
That's such a crucial point because it created this incredible competitive depth. We weren't just talking about a simple 2 or 3 team race for the title.
Exactly. This source highlights what felt like a big 7 or maybe even a big 8. You had Milan, Inter, Juve, Lazio, Roma, Parma, Fiorentina, all fiercely competing for the Scudetto and those valuable European spots year in, year out.
It meant almost every single match day felt huge, unpredictable.
Absolutely. And you mentioned those teams. The distinct styles were a massive part of the magic, weren't they? The analysis talks about Milan's almost precise art-like football under Sacchi and Capello.
Juve's sheer discipline and power. Inter being brilliantly inconsistent but capable of anything.
Lazio's attacking flair, Roma's pure emotional connection with the fans, Parma's really brave approach.
And Fiorentina with Batistuta, just iconic. Each team really had its own clear identity.
Which often stemmed directly from their tactical approach. And look, while the lazy stereotype outside Italy was always, defensive football or catenaccio, this analysis really pushes back hard on that simple idea.
Right. It clarifies that catenaccio, which means door bolt or lock, wasn't just about parking the bus. That's too simplistic.
Way too simplistic. It was a highly organized system requiring incredibly precise movement and coordination from everyone, like intricate clockwork. It was about control, minimizing risk through structure, not just negativity.
Yeah, the source frames the coaches of that era, not just as managers, but almost as tactical game designers. People like Sacchi at Milan pioneering zonal marking, which was revolutionary.
Capello building an attacking Roma side that was still incredibly solid defensively, or Lippi's amazing tactical versatility at Juventus, they could play multiple ways.
And this is where the source suggests Italy was genuinely years ahead of the curve, globally speaking.
Oh, for sure. It argues that other major leaguers were, frankly, years behind, still trying to get to grips with tactical ideas that Italy had already mastered and, in some cases, even moved beyond. Think about formations like the 3-5-2. Italy was using that effectively way back in the 1990 World Cup. Italy was really seen as the world's leading football laboratory then.
And a really unique point the analysis makes is how defenders were celebrated, almost as much as forwards. Names like Paolo Maldini, Alessandro Nesta, Fabio Cannavaro. These guys weren't just defenders, they were global superstars.
They really were. That was different from most other places where usually all the glory went to the goal scorers. It speaks to a different appreciation of defensive craft, tactical discipline, maybe.
And the analysis connects all of this league strength directly to the success of the Italian national team during this period. Makes perfect sense.
Exactly. The players didn't need to go anywhere else in the world for top-level competition. It was happening right there every single week in Serie A. Playing against that concentration of talent constantly forged incredibly strong national sides.
Finalists in the 94 World Cup, quarters in 98, Euro finalists in 2000.
And of course, lifting the World Cup in 2006. The analysis states clearly, the strong national team wasn't some mystery. It was a direct product of the immense quality flooding the domestic league week in, week out.
And this golden age, it wasn't just for the tactical nerds or the hardcore analysts. The source points out how it became this shared cultural memory for a whole generation, even if you weren't, deep into the X's and O's.
Absolutely. It was just widely accessible on TV, more so than maybe some leagues are now globally. You kind of absorbed it. You knew the shirts, you knew the players from video games or posters, the iconic goals, the big moments. It was just part of the cultural fabric.
Yeah, you just felt it. Saying Ronaldo in the black and blue or picturing those classic Milan stripes instantly brings back that whole era. The source suggests that even with today's super high-def broadcasts, that 90s era feels almost more vivid in memory for many fans.
So, okay, that was the undisputed peak. The million-dollar question is, what brought it all down? The analysis points to the early 2000s as the beginning of, well, the shifting sands.
And what's particularly insightful from the analysis is that while Italy largely stayed kind of fixed on its successful formula, the global football landscape was changing fast around it.
Really fast. The Premier League, for example, started aggressively focusing on global marketing, packaging the game as entertainment, emphasizing speed and spectacle.
And La Liga leaned heavily into showcasing individual superstars. Think the Galacticos at Real Madrid as global brands. Football was becoming less about just the tactical battle and more about, I guess, a global entertainment industry.
But Italy, according to this analysis, kind of resisted that evolution. It points to tangible things like the stadiums, many were old, still state-owned from the Italian '90 World Cup, which made redevelopment slow and really difficult compared to, say, England's rapid stadium modernization push.
Right, and crucially, the approach to TV rights. This is a big one in the analysis. Instead of a bundled league-wide package like the Premier League, brilliantly implemented to maximize collective revenue and bargaining power.
Italian clubs largely continued selling their TV rights individually, club by club, which sounds okay maybe for the giants, but overall it meant the total financial inflow into the league just wasn't keeping pace with the explosion happening elsewhere in Europe.
And there was maybe this underlying mindset, the analysis suggests, that the old ways were just inherently superior and would keep working, simply because they had been the best. Bit of complacency, perhaps.
You could say that, like that top student who doesn't adapt to new ways of learning because their old methods always got them A's before. It's understandable, but dangerous.
Exactly. And this financial lag started to become really critical. As other leagues got richer and marketed themselves better globally, Italy just couldn't compete in the transfer market like they used to.
Yeah.
The shift was, well, profound.
It really was. Italian clubs, instead of being the ultimate destination signing the world's best, started having to sell their most promising young players to finance themselves.
Serie A went from being the absolute final destination for elite talent to becoming more and more a high-quality stepping stone. Players would develop there, showcase their talent, but then move on for bigger contracts, more global exposure, maybe perceive better opportunities elsewhere.
And then came the catastrophe, 2006. Calciopoli.
Yeah, the analysis identifies this as the single most devastating blow, arguably. It exposed this widespread network of manipulation, essentially involving top club officials trying to influence referee appointments.
The phone taps were damning. They revealed people openly discussing which referees should be assigned to which matches, seemingly to favor certain teams, particularly Juventus.
And the analysis emphasizes that the real damage, the deep wound, went far beyond just the potential impact on results on the pitch, as bad as that obviously was.
Absolutely. Football, for fans, is built on this foundation of faith, right? On the idea of a level playing field, a perceived truth in the contest. When the system itself was revealed to be rigged, or at least heavily manipulated from the inside, that faith was just shattered.
The source uses really strong language here, suggesting it basically killed the feeling of genuine competition for many fans, perhaps irreversibly. That sense that what you were watching was pure.
It's a fundamental betrayal of the sport's integrity. And the consequences were severe, cascading right across the league. Juventus, the club most heavily implicated, was relegated to Serie B and stripped of 2 league titles.
But the analysis makes another crucial point here. It wasn't just Juve. Teams not directly involved in the lobbying for specific referees, like Fiorentina and Lazio, they still received massive points deductions.
Which was huge. They lost out on European qualification spots, lost crucial revenue streams, and were, you could argue, unfairly punished because of the systemic rot that was exposed. The analysis describes it as a kind of wide net casting. The scandal damaged the integrity and standing of the entire league, hurting innocent parties too, and revealing just how deep the problems might have run.
It's certainly highlighted in the source as one of the biggest scandals in football history, and it forever changed the perception of Serie A, both domestically and globally.
Definitely. And the long aftermath really has just been a continued struggle, compounding those initial problems that were already bubbling under the surface.
Absolutely. The analysis details the ripple effects. Credibility was shot, so sponsors became hesitant. Broadcast rights value plummeted even further because the product was seen as damaged goods.
And that player drain we talked about, it accelerated. Why would top players choose or top sponsors invest heavily in a league perceived as tainted and, frankly, in decline?
And the impact on the fans themselves was profound. As the analysis notes, Italian fans became deeply disillusioned. You saw attendances dropping, particularly for games that weren't the massive local derbies.
Yeah, some fans, the source suggests, even started questioning why they should invest so much emotion, so much passion, if the core integrity of the competition felt compromised.
So as we touched on, Serie A really solidified its place as a league where players often develop before moving on to bigger clubs in England or Spain, rather than being the ultimate destination.
And the analysis keeps reiterating this core point. The problems weren't just about a dip in the quality of play on the pitch after 2006, though that happened too. They were about these persistent systemic failures in management, a lack of cohesive league-wide strategy, and that continued fragmented economic structure we mentioned earlier, especially the TV rights and stadium issues.
Italy, as a league, just fell further and further behind in what this analysis calls the global football industry arms race. It wasn't equipped to compete off the pitch.
No, there was that brief, really exciting moment, wasn't there? Inter Milan's trouble under Jose Mourinho in 2010, winning Serie A, the Coppa Italia, and the Champions League.
A phenomenal achievement, yeah. A temporary high point in that post-Calciopoli gloom, showing Italian clubs could still, reach the very pinnacle in Europe.
Absolutely. But the key point extracted from the analysis is that it wasn't built upon systemically. It was more down to Mourinho's specific genius and a particular group of players. When Mourinho left, there wasn't a solid structure or a forward-thinking vision at Inter, or crucially, across the league as a whole. To really learn from that, replicate it, or build on that success, it felt isolated.
And you saw the result of that pretty starkly after Inter's 2010 win. Italian clubs largely disappeared from the sharp end of European competitions for quite a few years. That really hammered home the extent of the decline from their previous dominance, where you expected multiple Italian teams in the quarterfinals or semis.
So, okay, bringing it all together now, what are the major takeaways from this analysis of Serie A's rise and fall?
Well, beyond the specific tactics and the results on the field, the core argument that comes through loud and clear is this. The decline wasn't primarily caused by Italian teams suddenly forgetting how to play football. That wasn't it.
No. It was a fundamental failure to adapt the underlying systems, the economic model, the administrative structures, maybe even, as the source hints, some cultural resistance to necessary change in a world, particularly the football world, that was transforming incredibly rapidly around them.
The analysis even draws some fascinating, maybe slightly uncomfortable analogies to certain perceived cultural traits, things like a powerful pride in past glory, making it hard to admit change is needed, perhaps focusing too much on individual brilliance over robust collective systems, a real resistance to changing successful old methods, and maybe instances of internal chaos or an inability to act collectively for the league's greater good.
It's a painful truth that emerges from the source material. Past greatness and having an abundance of natural talent, well, they just aren't enough on their own if you lack the modern organizational structure, the strategic foresight, the willingness to plan for the future, and maybe the sheer courage to change course even when things were once incredibly successful.
The analysis does note, to be fair, that there have been some recent flickers of revival in Serie A, with teams performing a bit better at European competitions lately.
True, there are signs. But it strongly emphasizes that any true sustained recovery requires that deep league-wide systemic change and a genuinely new way of thinking, not just hoping that isolated success from one or two clubs will somehow magically turn the tide for everyone.
And this is why this whole story matters to you, the listener, even if you're not a diehard football fanatic. Because as the analysis powerfully demonstrates, this isn't just a football story. Not really.
Exactly. It's a compelling case study in how even the most dominant, seemingly unshakable systems in any field can crumble if they become complacent, fail to adapt effectively to external changes, and suffer from critical internal structural weaknesses. It's a lesson that applies to almost any industry, any business, any area of life where past success can breed a dangerous resistance to necessary evolution.
So let's quickly recap our journey through this analysis then. We saw Italian football rise to an absolute, undisputed peak in the 90s and early 2000s, fueled by incredible talent density, tactical innovation, fierce competitive depth, and a national team that perfectly reflected that domestic strength.
Then the turning point came in the early 2000s. The global game evolved rapidly towards global marketing and entertainment, while Italy, the analysis argues, remains stubbornly rooted in its older structures, things like outdated stadiums, fragmented TV rights, maybe a mindset resistant to change.
This led inevitably to a financial lag and players starting to leave, the league losing its ultimate destination status. Then the devastating blow. Calciopoli in 2006, a scandal that shattered fan faith and caused widespread systemic damage, punishing even clubs not directly involved.
And this resulted in a long-term decline marked by loss of credibility, fan disillusionment, the league solidifying as a stepping stone, and continued failures in management and economic strategy. Brief, unsustainable successes like Inter's 2010 treble were really the exceptions that proved the rule of systemic decline, according to this analysis.
The core lesson from the source material remains stark and maybe simple. The world keeps moving forward, and if you stand still, no matter how proud you are of your past glory, you risk being left behind.
Which leaves us with this final powerful thought drawn from the heart of this analysis for you to maybe ponder. If even a system as dominant, as talented, and as intensely proud as Italian football at its absolute prime could fall so far, so fast, partly by relying on what used to work.
What does that tell us about the critical importance of constant adaptation, continuous improvement, and perhaps having the courage to actively challenge our own past successes in whatever we pursue?
Something to definitely think about.